Welcome back to the channel, everyone. So happy to see you back here again. I'm not sure why you keep showing up, frankly. I'm probably a C-tier creator on my best days, but either way, I will not look a gift viewer in the mouth. So I'm happy you chose to click on the video today. Anyway, this weekend was Dissonance for the first time for Trials of Osiris, and I was super late to the grind as it was a holiday weekend, had a lot going on. But I managed to dive into Trials today on stream for several hours, and we had a great time. We won a lot of games, got a lot of igneous hammers to drop. It was a right good time, and I really liked how Dissonance played for Trials personally. But out of curiosity on stream, you know, we checked out the current meta for Trials, and there are some wild things going on with the meta, and I thought it might be a good discussion for today's video, really exploring the question, is this a good meta that we find ourselves in today for Trials? Are you happy with this meta? So let's unpack that. And you'll see some Trials footage from today in the video. You might see some old Trials clips that I never used or uploaded. You might even see some X-Defiant gameplay, as I've been playing a ton of that with that. You know, it's a brand new free-to-play arcade shooter as well. So we'll see. Whatever happens, happens, I guess. But let's get into the meta here. We'll chat about weapons. We'll chat about exotics. We'll chat about subclasses. But the first thing I want to take note of is definitely the weapons. You know, what's on top? What's the king of the Crucible right now when winning matters? And the answer there is undeniably and unwaveringly and consistently Igneous Hammer alongside Conditional Finality. Yeah, let's check the numbers here. Igneous Hammer is responsible for the most kills in Trials, claiming currently more than 2 million final blows this weekend, right? The next best primary is the Ace of Spades with 650,000, which is less than a third of that. It's a wild gap there for sure. That's pretty different from last week on Eventide when like Igneous was more or less tied with the Ace of Spades. But one thing has stayed consistent, and that's the solid dominance of hand cannons as a whole in Trials. This week, they accounted for 28% of all kills, more than 1 out of every 4 kills, which is considerably more than the next best thing, which is pulse rifles, at 15%, nearly half as many. And that's surprising since Dissonance is honestly an incredible pulse rifle map too, with these long angles on the edges of the map. So hand cannon and shotgun is basically the meta, to boil it down. That's what's sitting alone at the top of Mount Olympus right now, with everything else considerably lower on that list. Now, here's where we get into some opinion area, and I'd love to hear from you on this in the comments as well, but I want to talk about hand cannons trending on top versus basically anything else. Do you like when hand cannons are the kings of the Crucible, or do you wish other things could shine? This is where things are going to get maybe a little bit, I mean, they can get tense, as they sometimes do, but let's try to keep it civil here. Personally, I don't mind when hand cannons are the meta because, frankly, I feel like it keeps the gameplay moving pretty quickly. I'm not even a hand cannon main. I do like hand cannons. I use hand cannons quite frequently, but it's not my favorite thing to do. But it's not slow. It's not passive matches. People push. The matches don't take forever. So I don't personally mind when hand cannons and shotguns are on top. But I also fully understand and respect that many people don't feel the same way, and I think that's totally fine as well. But I wanted to make a little comparison here between the way Bungie handles hand cannons versus other primary weapon types. So there's definitely a difference. Hand cannons have been on top historically far more than any other weapon types, but they don't really get nerfs very often at all. Remember earlier in the season when auto rifles were the kings for about 3 weeks in Trials? Summoners and Omits and Prosecutors were all crushing it in Trials, and they were on top for a few weeks, and then Bungie swooped in and they nerfed auto rifles to bring them back down in line. You remember that? Here's the interesting thing. At their highest point during that stretch there, autos were responsible for 32.8% of all Trials kills, and that was on Cauldron. Now that is a lot, right? Like, that's a huge number for one weapon type to claim. And that's when Bungie said, okay, well, wait, that's not right. Let's bring these things back down a little bit. And to be clear, I don't think that was a bad decision, frankly. They only nerfed one specific archetype of auto rifle, really. But here's the difference, okay? Before that week, we were seeing some percentages for hand cannons that were similar and sometimes wildly superior. For example, in the Trials weeks leading up to that 32% auto rifle week, we had hand cannons on Endless Veil with 35.8% of all kills, which is more than the auto's 32%. But get this, the week before that one of Trials, that one, hand cannons claimed 47.2% of all kills in Trials. Yes, that's not a typo. They basically claimed 1 out of every 2 kills in all of Trials that weekend. And even with a near 50% usage rate, there was no outcry against hand cannons being on top. But when autos sneak up to 30%, the world is caving in and Bungie has to intervene. Now again, I just want to reiterate that I'm not taking a side here. I fully understand both angles. And like I said, I don't mind when hand cannons are the meta as long as other things can compete as well. And I've never had a problem maining sidearms or pulses against hand cannons and shotgun teams. But I also totally get where players are coming from when they say things like, yo, PvP players just hate when anything other than hand cannon and shoddy is on top. Like, honestly, they're not entirely wrong to say so, but it's good discussion fuel, and I'd love to hear you weigh in down in the comments and let me know what you think of that sort of dualism there. But let's move on from weapons and let's talk about subclasses next. Now, this is always an interesting discussion to me. We almost always see the same classes near the top week in and week out as meta shift and the sandbox gets adjusted. It's always still pretty consistent here. The top 3 subclasses this week have been Solar Warlock at the top with 19.2% usage, followed by Solar Hunters with 17.1% and Void Titans with 15.1%. Not a bad split here for the top 3, honestly. It's everything after that that's wild. Hunters claim 3 of the top 5 subclasses, while they only claim 1 spot in the bottom 7. So now many people immediately jump to that statistic that there are just more hunters in Destiny than anything else because more people play that class. And I get that, you know, we see 44% of players in Trials are Hunters, 30% are Warlocks, 26% are Titans. So obviously Hunters way on top in terms of just how many people are playing them. But what I want to zero in on is actually the gaps among Hunters from subclass to subclass versus the gaps for the other classes from subclass to subclass. Take Warlocks, for example. While Solar Warlocks are extremely popular with 19.1%, the next best subclass for Warlocks is Voidwalkers, way down at 4.2%. That's basically a 15% drop to the next best subclass for Warlocks. Compare that to Hunters, where Void Hunters are about 11%, only 7 less than the leading subclass, and then 9.4% on Strands, still very popular and within 8% of the top choice. But that same jump of 15% in popularity for Hunters, that's the gap between their number 1 choice and their dead last number 5 choice. And Warlocks see that 15% drop off between their number 1 choice and their number 2 choice. That is a huge difference, and I want to talk about that. And it's a similar situation for Titans, where you basically see 1 subclass choice on top, and all the others are way down in the single digits. This is basically objectively showing that Hunters simply have far more options in elimination, more subclasses that are viable and useful in Trials. And Titans and Warlocks basically have 1 good option, and the other subclasses are down on the bottom rung. All this to say, Warlocks and Titans are basically forced into picking 1 option. It's either that or they're playing at a disadvantage. Yes, there are more Hunters in general, but among the Hunters, there is a much more even spread of them across several different subclasses, while Warlocks and Titans basically have the 1 choice. Now again, people always think I'm a Hunter hater when I call attention to that. This is not me hating. That's me pointing out that Hunters are one of the most well-balanced classes as a whole in the game. Several different Hunter subs bring a lot to the table in PvP and can be super effective. I love playing my Hunter in Trials. I gravitate towards my Cryo Gorilla build on Stasis or my Atheris build on Solar. So don't go throwing shade at me because I'm out here to get Hunters. I'm not. Honestly, I think Bungie needs to rethink Dominion as a whole and take another good hard look at some of the changes and nerfs that they've dropped on things like Solar Titans, Behemoth Titans, Voidwalkers, and Stormcallers. Heck, even Arc Striders could use a little bit of love. But be sure to let me know what you make of the subclass usage rates and what they tell you down below. Now, the last thing I want to hit is the exotic armor. One thing becomes immediately clear, and that's that the Warlocks get the shaft when it comes to exotic armor. Of the top 16 armor pieces being used, Hunters claim 7 of them, Titans claim 6 of them. Warlocks only claim 3. Hunters have a mix of raw dueling exotics like the Stompies and the Wormhusk for healing mid-combat, Knucklehead Radar, Frosties, but they also have unique exotics that actively do specific things like Mask of Bacchus, which I love for slowing teleporting dodges, Athrus's Embrace for homing one-shot kill knives to the body, even 6th Coyote, which is being used to drop multiple strand clones that send out threadlings, do explosive AoE damage, ping radars, soak up aim assist, and can be used as physical cover. Titans have a similar situation where they have several options on the table. We've got neutral exotics with passive enhancements like Dune Marchers, Peacekeepers, Syntheseps, but then there are more active exotics like Peregrine Greaves for one-shot shoulder charges or feedback fences for melee damage reversals, or even One-Eyed Mask for enemy tracking and health on kill. There are lots of options here, but then we come to the Warlocks, and Warlocks really only have two choices. It's either Ophidians, which are about to be available for everyone, or the Transversive Steps. They don't do any clever active things. They just increase your handling or reload speed, or they reload your gun for you while you're sprinting. That's it. Osmiomancies, they also make the list, but they're way down at 7% usage rate, and even though that's even though Stasis Warlocks are only being used 3% of the time in Trials, which makes them the 10th most popular subclass, or rather puts them in 10th out of 15 total choices, pretty far down. And that basically solidifies that Warlocks have nothing. If you're a Stasis Warlock, then you have to run Osmiomancies, or you may as well get off the class. And since Ophidians and Transversives don't do anything super unique, they're just basically the same as some of the other Titan and Hunter exotics, we can then conclude that it's not that they're OP, it's that Warlock exotics suck in comparison to Hunter and Titan. And I play all classes. This isn't just me being a Warlock stan. It's objectively true that Hunters and Titans have far more exotic armor options when winning matters than Warlocks do. But again, I'd love to hear from you on this topic as well. So why do Warlocks basically have 2 usable exotics in high-end PvP while Hunters and Titans have several more? Let me know your take on that in the comments section. And with that, let's bring the discussion back full circle to where we started, considering the weapons that are the most lethal, considering the subclasses that are the most popular, and considering the exotics that see the most usage. Do you personally like the meta that we find ourselves in for Trials of Osiris? And no, I'm not talking about matchmaking, I'm not talking about team balancing and all that stuff. I'm just talking about the meta. Where do you stand on it? Please weigh in. I do try to read every comment on the channel, and I appreciate your feedback. Thanks, as always, for tuning into the video today. Feel free to leave a like on it, only if you enjoyed it, and subscribe for additional Destiny 2 content. Be warm and well fed, my friends, and I hope to catch you in the Crucible.